Section 5 of The Black Cat, Volume 6, Number 10, July 1901. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Beeswax Candle. The Black Cat, Volume 6, Number 10, July 1901. Section 5. Old Man Hornbeck's Conversion by C.E.G. Peabody. It was the spring of the year, and the wildflowers were running riot over the mesas, as only the wildflowers of California can when once coaxed out by the warm spring rains. The wash, usually nothing but a sinuous streak of gleaming sand and rocky boulders, was now raised, by the melting snows in the mountains, to the dignity of a turbulent river. To the westward, the Puente Hills shone dimly through the scattering fog that the morning sun was driving before it. Over Welch's head, on the swaying bough of a sugar gum, a mockingbird sang merrily, bubbling now and then up into the air in a paroxysm of joy. Hobbling along the road like a gigantic grasshopper with the rheumatism came Seth Lane, a moving blot upon a peaceful landscape. "Been rolling in the mud," said old Seth, as, mud encased, he paused before Welch and apologetically mopped his leathery face with a piece of flour sacking which, owing to the old man's rigid sense of economy, did duty for a handkerchief. "So I see," said Welch severely. "It would seem to me that an old man like—" "Been bidding old man Hornbeck good-bye," interrupted Lane blandly. "He's been living down there by the bend near the wash." "On the Claylands?" asked Welch absently. "Yes, on them Claylands," chuckled the old man. "He came up here about 4 months ago from the Downey country, where he'd been raising hogs and alfalfa, and doing well too. But he thought he wasn't making money fast enough, so he came up here in the citrus belt, where he could get rich in a hurry. I rather liked Hornbeck when he first came here, because he was so straightforward and honest. Why, he's the only man I ever trusted in my life to buy my tobacco. There came a time, however, when I had my faith somewhat shattered in him. But here I am trying to husk my pumpkins when I ain't even planted the seed yet, so I get back where the trail starts and commence right. You see, Hornbeck is one of them funny fellers what think that all men are honest because they are themselves. How in the name of tarnation a man can grow up outside of a lunatic asylum and hold on to that impression is beyond me. Well, he came up here looking for an orange ranch, and Newby got hold of him. And when Newby gets hold of a man, you can bet that somebody is getting experience, and that it ain't Newby. Newby is one of them fellers what point with pride to the fact that they are still out of jail, and that their reputation for honesty is good amongst those that don't know them. When that man Newby comes round me, walking on his toes like a cat, and smelling of hair oil and cussedness, I always feel like holding my nose and yelling, "Polecat!" He was an undertaker before the boom struck the country, and then he went into the real estate business, just like everybody else did. But like everybody else, he didn't get ashamed of it and quit when the boom busted, but hung on like the toothache when you were 40 miles from a jawsmith. And when the little church that you can see down there by them blue gums got so poor that they couldn't afford to hire a preacher, Newby volunteered to fill the pulpit for what he could find on the plate. That wasn't much, but it gave him a certain genteel standing, and that was what he was after. Religion is Newby's strong point. He always wears a face so long that when he eats dinner and his mouth gets down to pie, his nose has just commenced to smell the soup. Well, Newby nosed out Hornbeck just like a dog does a rat. And the next thing I heard was that he had sold Hornbeck his 10-acre ranch down near the wash for $5,000, which was highway robbery, for I wouldn't give him 10 cents for it, unless I could force someone I hated to take it for a gift. You know when a cat goes into a strange garret for the first time, sees a lot of holes and cracks that look promising, but that what afterward turn out to be a delusion and a sneer? It was so with Hornbeck. He hadn't been here long before he commenced to look thoughtful, as if he was doing a heap of thinking, and I saw right away that he had something on his mind. I had a pretty good idea what it was too, for he wasn't the first man to see a great light in this settlement.
"Seth," said he one day to me, "do you belong to the church?" "God bless my soul, Hornbeck," said I never did a thing in my life that I was ashamed of, and I never expect to. I ain't got anything to cover up, and I pay my debts. What in the name of tarnation do I want to join the church for?" "Well," said he, "I'm kind of glad that you don't, 'cause I want someone to talk to that I can trust, and I've lost all faith in church members. Is that man Newby honest?" "Well," said I saw Newby's grandmother yesterday, and she still had her false teeth. But then she knew Newby before she had any use for false teeth, and I suppose she knows enough now to keep her mouth shut when Newby is around. If it wasn't for that, I'm betting that Newby would have them teeth." "I asked him," said Hornbeck, with rising indignation, "if them orange trees was all navels, and he said they was." "So they be," said I, with a chuckle. "But did Newby say anything about them being Australians trimmed in to look like the Washington naval?" "And I asked him if the water right was a good one," shouted Hornbeck, "and he said that it was just as good a right as my neighbour had, and that he raised ducks." "So he does," said I. "But did Newby say anything about them ducks being pecans, what get along better without water?" "Seth," said he, kind of solemn like, "all the money that I have is in this ranch, and I can't afford to lose it." "Hornbeck," said I, "you are stuck, and there ain't no use denying it. Everybody around here knows it but you, and it was time that you was grasping the situation. Newby has been trying to unload that clay bank on someone for the last 10 years. Look at them trees," said I. "Nearly every one of them is a hoss marine, and when they do bear, which ain't often, the fruit ain't worth picking. And look at that soil. Why, there is a hard pan under it that you can't break with a crowbar. I was here when Newby planted them trees, and the only way he got a hole to put them in was blowing one out with dynamite. If you don't pour the fertilizer on them trees, they will starve to death in a few years. They're turning yellow already. And look at your water right," said I. "Why, I will guarantee to drink all the water you get this summer, and what little you have is in the courts, and the chances are that you will lose that." "Them's plain facts, Hornbeck," said I, "and it will do you good to think them over. Now there ain't but one thing for you to do. You can't expect to stay on this ranch and make a living. You'd have to put more in it than you could ever dream of taking off. Now what you want to do is to slick this place up and put a gilt-edged polish on it, then keep the moss marines trimmed in to look like the real thing, and sell out to the first tenderfoot sucker that comes along." "But I can't do that," said he. "I never beat a man in my life, and I'm too old to commence now." "God bless my soul, Hornbeck," said I. "Tenderfeet ain't men. It ain't no crime to rob a tenderfoot. That's what they're for. There's many a good man around here, to say nothing of Newby, what would have to work for a living if it wasn't for tenderfeet. Honesty is the best policy when there's any danger of the other fellow shooting. But did you ever hear of a tenderfoot who knew which was the business end of a gun?" But it didn't make any difference what I said. Hornbeck wouldn't take my advice, and I left him in disgust. Well, about 2 weeks later I saw Hornbeck again, and he drew me aside and said, "I've been thinking the matter over, Seth, and I've about come to the conclusion that I've been denying myself the consolation of religion in my old age." Well, I laughed, and laughed, and laughed, and then I commenced and laughed all over again, for Hornbeck had a reputation for free thinking that had followed him and extended over 3 counties. "What's the joke?" said I, thinking that the real laugh was yet to come. "There ain't no joke," said he, as solemn as an owl. "I've seen the error of my ways, and henceforth I walk the straight and narrow way." "Well," said I, "if you hold on to that ranch you will need all the religion you can get." Well, sir, in spite of what he said to prepare me for what he knew would be an awful shock, you could have knocked me down with a feather when I heard that he had been to church. I didn't believe it even then, and I didn't believe it for a fact till the next Sunday when I saw him with my own eyes. And then I couldn't help thinking that it was one of Hornbeck's jokes. But when I saw him drop a 2-bit piece on the plate when it came round, I saw that it wasn't no joke, and that another good man had gone wrong. I don't think I ever let a thing worry me so much since I lost my bird dog. You never saw such a change came over a man in your life as came over Hornbeck when he got religion. Before that he would laugh and joke and tell a funny story with the best of us. But now he went around with his mouth drooping down like a rainy moon, and he had a way of looking at you and shaking his head and groaning, and then walking on that made you feel like asking who was dead. Next to Newby, he was the biggest walking tombstone around here, and I saw that Newby was getting a little nervous for fear that Hornbeck was after his job. Well, one Sunday I was coming along the road, having been hunting, when I met Hornbeck and Newby on their way home from church. "A man of sin," groaned Newby, rolling his eyes like a coyote caught in a trap. "A brand to be rescued from the burning," said Hornbeck with a pious shudder. "Guess you'll find that this brand was burnt up long ago," said I with a grin. "Seth," said Hornbeck, "we are about to feed the inner man after a feast of the soul down at the church under the beautiful guidance of Brother Newby. Will you join us, and while we eat chicken, listen to the beautiful thoughts that flow so gently from the lips of our dear friend and brother?" Well, that word chicken caught me, and I went along. Mrs. Hornbeck has a reputation for cooking, and I knew I would be taken care of. Besides, I saw that Newby didn't want me along, so I went just to spite him. Well, sir, it was the funniest meal I ever ate. Newby would get a choice bit of chicken on his fork, and then he would smack his lips and start to put it to his mouth, but before he got it there, Hornbeck would groan. Then, of course, Newby was in duty bound to pause and groan too. I'll be hanged if I think that Hornbeck allowed Newby to put more than 3 mouthfuls in his mouth during the whole meal. Well, when the meal was over, Hornbeck was seized with a regular fit of groaning. "Brother," said Newby with a sickly smile, "I fear that you have not laid all your burdens at the feet of the Lord." "There is a heavy weight within me," groaned Hornbeck, moving uneasily. "Conscience," said Newby. "Indigestion," said I. "Let the blessed Spirit into thy heart," groaned Newby. "It will sweeten thy soul." "Take a little soda, Hornbeck," said I. "It will sweeten thy stomach." "Brother," groaned Hornbeck, rolling his eyes at Newby and ignoring me, "I have had a terrible weight upon my soul ever since I joined the church and saw the blessed light, and I fear for the welfare of a dear friend of mine. I know he means all right now, no matter what his intentions may have been in the past, but he is in doubt how to make proper retribution. Some time ago, this man discovered gold on the land of another. Now, instead of making his discovery known to the owner, he concealed the fact and bought the land for what it was worth for farming purposes." I saw Newby sit up with a sudden start and turn kind of green and white around his gills, but I didn't know at that time that Hornbeck had dropped a gold nugget on the plate that morning at church. "Was it wrong for him to secure this land with the secret knowledge that he possessed?" asked Hornbeck, leaning forward and looking at Newby anxiously. "Wrong?" gasped Newby, holding up his hands in horror. "Why, he will be lost forever unless he allows the poor man he robbed at least a portion of his ill-gotten gains." "I am in doubt, said Hornbeck with a groan. "He's lost if he doesn't," exclaimed Newby. "He's a derned fool if he does," said I. Well, sir, for more than 4 weeks, every time that Newby would send the plate around, Hornbeck would groan and drop a gold nugget on it. And every time that he'd done it, Newby would twist and squirm and try to look pleasant, but he made a mighty poor job of it. I'm hanged if I didn't get in the habit of going to church every Sunday just to see Newby squirm. Well, I saw the whole thing then, just as plain as day. Hornbeck had discovered gold on the Newby ranch before he bought it. Didn't surprise me much, for it lays up agin the mountains, and I've always said that they will find gold around there somewhere. But what tickled me was the fact that Hornbeck was cute enough to keep it still and get Newby to let the place go under the impression that he was selling it to a sucker. Well, sir, when I really grasped the situation, I laughed till I thought I would bust. And every time I saw Newby, I would hold my sides and laugh again. And then Newby would shake his head and groan, and then pass on like a man going to his own funeral. But what worried me was Hornbeck getting religion. For when a man gets religion as bad as Hornbeck did, there was no telling where he is going to break out at. I saw that Newby's game was to work upon Hornbeck till he made him think it was his duty to give the ranch back. I couldn't see no way of heading him off, for every time that I tried to speak to Hornbeck about it and tell him not to make a fool of himself, he would commence groaning and keep it up till I'd left him in disgust. Well, sir, the way that Newby went at Hornbeck was beautiful to see. He preached a series of powerful sermons on the curse of wealth, legal dishonesty, and moral theft, and every one of them was aimed straight at Hornbeck, who would twist and squirm around on his seat. Never once did he miss dropping a gold nugget on the plate, and once when the sermon was extra powerful, I saw him drop 2. Well, yesterday Hornbeck looked me up and asked me to come up and take dinner with him. "Is that coyote going to be there?" said I, meaning Newby. "A good and moral man," groaned Hornbeck. "And we're going to have chicken, Seth," he added. "Coyote and chicken don't mix except to become coyote," said I. "Seth," said he, earnestly, "just come up as a favour to me." "All right," said I. "I'll come to oblige you. Beside, it would be a shame if you had to throw away any of that chicken." Well, sir, what I saw and heard there nearly took away my appetite for chicken. We hadn't got more than fairly started before Newby commenced to worry Hornbeck by insinuating that his mansion in the skies had a mortgage on it, and that it would be just as well to lift it before he moved in. I sat right across from Newby, and I managed to get in one good kick on his shins, but he kept them out of the way after that, and I had to sit there and eat chicken, powerless to help myself. Well, finally Hornbeck broke down and commenced sobbing like a child, while I felt like wringing that miserable Newby's neck. I made up my mind that I would do it too, just as soon as the chicken was all gone. "Oh, brother, brother," sobbed Hornbeck, "if I hadn't found it, if I hadn't found it! If I could only get down to the Downy country and spend the rest of my life working among them poor lost souls down there, I might be almost happy and forget the dark, dark page of my life. Oh, if I hadn't found it, if I hadn't found it!" "Well, now that you have found it," said I in disgust, "you'd better hang on to it." "Why don't you go down to the Downy country and carry the light to the poor lost souls?" asked Newby, watching Hornbeck as a dog does a rat. "I can't," he groaned. "This ranch hangs like a millstone around my neck. If I was only free, I would gladly go." "Brother," said Newby, as if struck by a sudden thought, "why not sell the ranch? I would buy it myself if I thought it would further the blessed cause of religion." "Brother," sobbed Hornbeck, seizing hold of Newby's hand and wringing it, "if you would, it would make me the happiest man on the face of the earth. I feel it in my heart that it should belong to you of all persons." "About the price, brother?" asked Newby, with a purr of satisfaction. "Well," said Hornbeck, with a deep sigh, "I gave you $5,000 for it, you know, and I've made some improvements. Say $5,500, and I'll be free to move to the Downy country and save souls." "See here, Hornbeck," I began, when Newby cut me short. "You are a man of sin," said he, piously. "Shall we close the bargain, brother?" "Hornbeck," said I, "you are a dern—" "Let not thy angry passions rise," said Newby with a groan. "Shall I draw the papers, brother?" "I'll give you $6,000, Hornbeck," I shouted. "Seth," said he, earnestly, "I would prefer to have this ranch passed into the hands of a godly man. If you would join the church and I'll give you—" "Draw up the papers, brother," said he, turning sadly to Newby. "The tempter is abroad, and I may fall." Well, sir, I'm derned. That miserable Newby didn't have a deed already drawn with the exception of the price. I grabbed my hat and was leaving in disgust when Hornbeck asked me to remain and take his acknowledgment. I'm a justice of the peace, you know. I refused at first, but he said he would give me $1 if I would, and as I knew it would be my only chance to get any of the dern fool's money, I consented, although it did grind me to see that miserable Newby getting such a snap. "For the last time, Hornbeck," said I as I took up the pen, "I'll give you—" "You're a man of sin," groaned Newby. "Turn thy evil ways and see the blessed light," groaned Hornbeck in turn. That settled it. I took the dern addle-pated idiot's acknowledgment and fled. Well, this morning I went up to bid him good-bye and collect the $1 that he owed me. I'm always willing to trust a man till he gets religion, and then I demand cash. Wasn't any too soon, for Hornbeck, with all his household goods loaded on a lumber wagon, was just turning on the main road on his way for Downey. "Seth," said he as we shook hands, "join the church. There's more in it than you have any idea of. Get up." "No, thank ye," said I. "I've seen too many horrible examples to do likewise." Just then Newby came running up, all out of breath. "Brother Hornbeck! Brother Hornbeck!" he cried in his thin, squeaky voice. "Whoa!" said Hornbeck, pulling in his horses, and then seeing who it was, he said, "Goodbye, brother. Put thy faith in the Lord and be happy. Get up." "But Brother Hornbeck, Brother Hornbeck!" cried Newby, running alongside of the wagon. "What was it? That is, what was it you found?" "Found that I had been beat, you miserable scoundrel," roared Hornbeck. "Get up." Well, sir, when it dawned upon me that Hornbeck had been simply working Newby to unload the ranch upon him, I fell right down in the middle of the road and rolled and laughed and laughed and rolled. That's how I came to be so muddy. And while it ain't for me to criticise, not being a church member in regular standing, it did seem to me that Newby, when he stood there in the middle of the road shaking his fist at the disappearing Hornbeck, used language that was not becoming for a man who was supposed to administer to the spiritual welfare of the people in this here settlement.
End of section 5. End of The Black Cat, Volume 6, Number 10, July 1901.